All right, before I get this analysis video, I guess, started, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Leave your thoughts and opinions in the comment section below. I want to see what you guys think about All for One. So don't forget to do that, and let's get started with the video. Why All for One is the best villain in recent anime history? Alright, so All for One is a character from My Hero Academia who is, in a sense, the ultimate pillar of fear, evil, and death for the franchise, even more so than the main protagonist, Shigaraki. Partially because, he was Shigaraki's mentor. Before I continue any further, I want to explain three things. I want to explain one, All for One's backstory and who he is. Two, All Might and All for One's backstory since they coincidentally coincide with one another, and three, All for One's overall impact on the series. Then from there, I want to explain why this guy is hands down the most dangerous and most deadly villain in the franchise, and one of the most impressive and unforgettable villains in recent anime history. Alright, so let's start with All for One's backstory. All for One was a villain far back in Japanese history in the world of My Hero Academia, and he was one of those who was granted a quirk pretty early on. Well, not pretty early on, but like in the grand scheme of having quirks and quirks being a part of human culture, he was one that got one pretty early. This quirk was, well, appropriately named All for One. And this quirk was the ability to take and give others quirks, and he eventually used this for the benefit of himself and also the benefit others who didn't necessarily want a quirk, who wanted to be like normal people. He ended up getting a little bit greedy and obsessed with the power he was granted and started to take the quirks of people more frequently and most of the time without their permission or consent. We see this in the series with Ragdoll when he steals her quirk and never really uses it, to be honest. At least not that I'm aware of. Um, and with this power to gain and take away quirks, he started to build up basically like a quote unquote army of followers who basically felt that he was the most appropriate person to follow. He was saving them from either having quirks that they didn't want or giving them quirks that they really wanted. And this empire building was attempted to be taken down by All for One's younger brother. In order to oppose um in order to oppose All for One, his younger brother tried to stop him, but in that attempt, All for One decided to bestow a quirk on his seemingly quirkless brother. However, unknown to both his brother and himself, All for One, he gave he gave his younger brother the quirk to stockpile power. However, unbeknownst to All for One, that would ultimately be the quirk that led to his downfall. Alright, now that we have All for One's backstory out of the way, let's get into him and All Might's interactions in the series and how pivotal those interactions ended up being. All Might and All for One interact three times. Well, you could say three, but technically it's only two. The first time All Might meets with All for One, it's with Nana Shimura, All Might's mentor, and All Might is forced to flee the fight. Much to All Might's dismay, this fleeing mindset that Nana pushed upon him led to her untimely death, and was the first time and probably the main catalyst to why All Might has such a hard exterior. I mean, not a hard exterior towards All for One. The second time they interact is much later, like I think All Might says it himself, 4 or 5 years prior to him meeting Deku in a private fight. And they fight. And they fight hard. This is both the most strongest villain and the most strongest hero at their prime. And All Might wins with the expense of his health and the expense of his quirk. His quirk is now diminishing in a faster rate. Well, diminishing faster than it normally would have if he was just getting older and dying. And in the same situation, All Might crippled All for One to the point that he literally doesn't have a face. and he apparently All Might also haunts All for One's dreams, because when All Might beat All for One, he beat All for One while severely injured, having a hole in his chest, his guts kind of spewing out, and yeah, well, imagine that. Imagine dreaming about that every time you went to sleep. Jesus Christ, who wouldn't be traumatized? So those are the first two encounters they have. The third encounter we see within the My Hero Academia manga and the anime, and this is the final encounter with the two, the final battle encounter between the two, because they do talk after the battle just a bit. So the final encounter between All Might and All for One is a spectacle to the series, and does a lot in saying a lot of things. All Might and All for One were destined to fight each other. It's hands down like the most destined fight in anime history. It's probably the most anticipated fight in both the anime and the manga, because we knew it was gonna happen the instant it was brought up. And it was something that if All Might was worried about, you knew it was gonna be a good fight. And it really was. And it was also a really sad fight when it came down to the ending of it. All Might does eventually beat All for One through the taunting of All for One, about All Might basically trying to kill and attack his mentor's grandson, about how All for One basically murdered his mentor, and how All Might basically was exposed to, for his weak form, was exposed to the entire world, despite him not trying to expose it to anybody outside of the people he knew he could trust. And All for One did a lot of damage in that fight. He did a lot of damage to not only All Might and All Might's mentality, but also to the world as a whole. Even though All Might basically managed to beat All for One and effectively put him away, and even though he probably could have broken out anyways, All for One basically put a huge hole in Hero Society. He not only made the number one hero spot vacant and eventually opened up to Endeavor, out of all people, which doesn't really support the cause of maintaining Hero Society, but he also took away what the world needed most, or what All Might at least believed the world needed the most, a symbol of peace. And this is probably what All Might was fearing the most, and we can see why. We can see why All Might was so worried about this final encounter, because he knew that instant he was gone, things would change, not for the better, but for the worse. And who could blame him? He's right. And that was interesting. Those two have a really interesting dynamic, and it's really interesting to see how those two interact, how they fought, how they both went at each other's weaknesses and basically exploited them. All Might was literally torn down by hearing the news of the villain that he was trying to beat, and the one he eventually has Deku now be the grandson of his mentor. And that's a really hard thing to like deal with. Like imagine basically like trying to fight this villain, he gets away, and then you later find out that villain was the grandson of your mentor. That puts a hole in people. That literally puts a hole in people's mentality of themselves, how they treat other people. And it's like that interaction is now marred with the idea of, oh my god, I could have just killed my mentor's grandson. And in the same way, All Might messes around with All for One at the very end of the fight. All Might takes All for One's usual predictive style of fighting with just brute force and brute strength, and uses something that All for One doesn't expect. He takes a page out of Deku's book and gets a little bit more creative, and ironically takes another page out of Deku's book and breaks his bones on top of breaking his bones. That final United States of Smash was a lot. It shows All Might willing to take in what his protege is doing and applying it to something that he needs to get done. And not gonna lie, All Might got tricky with All for One, and that's what led to All for One's defeat. And I feel like that fight genuinely was like a lot of like character development, both for All Might and for showing how Deku's effect on All Might. Now that I've gone through his interactions with All Might and gone through All for One's backstory, I want to go. Well, let's look at All for One's overall impact on the series as a whole. All for One does a lot of things. All for One changes the world of My Hero Academia in a way he wanted. He got rid of the symbol of peace. He got rid of All Might, and he made a vacuum in Hero Society now has to be filled by heroes like Endeavor who don't have the same don't give off the same like values that All Might did. And that's one thing that All for One did. He does he rattles Hero Society to the greatest degree possible by getting rid of the number one hero everybody looked at as a symbol of peace. The second thing All for One does goes to show how far Deku has to go in mastering One for All, his quirk. And Deku being All for One, I mean Deku being um All Might's protege now has to fill in the shoes that All Might has left behind. And we see this starting to take effect on Deku. And he's starting to become a little bit more like self-aware. Like he's not trying to necessarily copy what All Might has done. He's not trying to be more individual. He's developed his shoot style to a good degree, and he's starting to become a little bit more powerful in his handling of the quirk One for All. He's gotten to 8% in the anime. I'm not gonna spoil what percent he's at in the manga because I think that's like what 2 arcs from now in the anime. So we'll see in the future. Um, and the third thing he does, the other thing that All Might does, I mean All for One does in the franchise, shows how far Deku has to go, and that's both a good thing and a bad thing. It's a good thing because it gets to see where All Might has left off, and we get to see where Deku's gonna have to clean up and do where do what All Might couldn't, and we also get to see how Deku's gonna have to deal with the mental effects of handling his quirk. And honestly, with the idea of the ultimate villain being taken down within the first, I would think it's like the first 52 chapters, 52 episodes of the anime, that says a lot because that means there's a lot more to come. Deku has a lot more of his story to progress on that All Might just won't be there to fight for him anymore. It's all now it's really Deku's story, and Deku's gonna really have to like step up to the plate along with the rest of his classmates. And another thing that All for One inadvertently does is we get to see a break in Bakugo's character. Bakugo, along with so initially Shigaraki started this whole catalyst of when he kidnapped Bakugo to try to recruit him. That's the catalyst of this whole fight. And when Shigaraki kidnaps Bakugo, Bakugo doesn't try to like fight back. Bakugo doesn't fight back at all. Like the whole situation until Bakugo's let free of his restraints, he doesn't try to fight back at all. And that's uncharacteristically not Bakugo. Bakugo's one to go full out rage mode, blast everything away, and this a sign of weakness that we don't normally see in Bakugo's character. And not gonna lie, it was pretty interesting to see. And we get to see this later in the Deku versus Bakugo fight where we see Bakugo open up to Deku. We see Bakugo open up to All Might, and we get to see how much he's been carrying with the last few. After All Might lost his quirk, we get to see how much he's been carrying in pain, and inadvertently, All for One's fight does this, and we get to see a lot more of a growth in Bakugo's character. We get to see him be a little bit more friendly around Deku and around most of his classmates. We get to see a side of Bakugo we never got to see. We got to see him show genuine care and emotion towards other characters. And I think this is necessarily the best part of All for One and All Might's final encounter. Like the impact they have on other characters in the series doesn't extend to now I gotta be better. It's like we get to see both a physical and a mental change. We see Bakugo now more emotionally expressive. We get to see Deku realize his full potential where he has to be. So things like All Might and All for One's fight never happens again. We get to see Tomoe Shigaraki's now mental he's a little more free, but he's also he's trying to step up and take the plate that All for One left behind. And these three characters are the most pivotal characters to the franchise at this point. No other characters are more important than Deku, Bakugo, and Tomoe Shigaraki. And I'm not gonna lie, if it wasn't for the All for One and All Might fight, I feel like things would have been a lot more stagnant, and I feel like Horikoshi would never have gone this far in the franchise that he has. Horikoshi is a character. Well, he isn't a character. He's a manga writer who's done really, really well with this franchise. He knows when to change the pace. He knows when to hand things off properly, and he knows when things need to change. And I'm not gonna lie, even though this fight brought me to tears, but reading it in the manga and watching it in the anime, he did a perfect job, and I can't complain. And the best part about this, now going explicitly anime exclusive, was the soundtrack. Dear God, the soundtrack's been playing in the background for this whole video, but oh my God, this soundtrack, every time I hear it, especially the moment at 211, sends shivers down my spine. I'll leave the link to the soundtrack that I got off of YouTube. Oh my God, this soundtrack. I've never felt so much fear and intimidation from a soundtrack in my life. And this goes back to my original statement. All for One is the best character and the best villain. Well, not the best character, but the best villain that we've gotten in modern day anime. And there's been a lot of new and exciting anime villains, but I feel like this one hits home. This one does a lot of things all the other anime villains fail to do. He has an impact. And there's always oh yeah, he has an impact, and then the impact just changes, and then he's eventually glossed. This impact will stay with this series forever. We see the end of All Might. We see Deku having to step up to the plate. We see Bakugo being more expressive. We see Tomoe Shigaraki now taking things into his own hands, being a lot more crafty and clever. It's this impact that he has on other characters is what makes All Might and the All for One fight so special, so important, so pivotal to My Hero Academia's success as a series, and why I genuinely love the series. And while I didn't necessarily go into full detail why All for One is the best villain, I feel like that final statement alone just goes without saying. All for One is undoubtedly the most powerful and scariest villains in recent anime history. And while this could be contested with a lot of other anime villains, he hands down that has the most effect, both on the emotional level of the characters in the stories, but also the emotional level in the real world. We see how All for One has impacted people. If you can sit down, watch this whole episode without crying, you're basically God, because there's always moments in this episode, in the fight between All for One and All Might, that sends shivers down your spine. It sends a wave of fear and panic over you, and you know it. We all know this was gonna happen. We knew it was gonna happen, but yet seeing it on screen is what made this fight so scary, so intimidating, and such a spectacle to watch. Well, hopefully you enjoyed this little video essay, I guess. I mean, that's what I would consider it at this point. It's been more of a video essay than anything else. On All for One, his character, his backstory, and his impact. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. Don't forget to share this video with other friends, and leave in the comment section, what do you think about All for One made him such an amazing villain to the My Hero Academia franchise? Do you think there will ever be a villain that tops All for One? I mean, personally, I don't think Horikoshi could do anything better than what he's done with this character. And where do you think the series is going to go in the future now that season 3 is over? I mean, if you read the manga, you're going to just spoil it anyways. But hopefully you enjoyed this video. Hopefully you enjoyed this little video essay. And I will see you on the next one.